Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is, of course, Tuesday. Just one second. All right. I'll hit there. So I guess we gotta fix that. Hold on a sec. Just gotta fix something here. All right. So welcome to the Mikestand. Today is of course Tuesday, October the 21st, 2021 or 2025 rather. Um, So we're just of course giving people a chance to come in before we get started. Friendly reminder to everybody: if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That would be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the question the best of my ability. Anyways, with that being said, let's go. Guess I'll talk a little bit about what I watched today, this afternoon. So, of course, saw a couple of Columbia Screen Gems, including, Screen Gems' take on the Red Riding Hood story. Red Riding Hood rides again in color with, of course, Billy the voice talents of Billy Bletcher, Sarah Berner, Elvia Altman, and then also later on doing kind of Tangled Angler in one of their Fables cartoons as well. I saw a Popeye cartoon where he's actually taking on a hypnotist who, in finding no one to practice on, no human anyways, decided to call a random number in the phone book. Ends up being Olive Oil, and he hypnotizes her over the phone to try to get her to come to him. Popeye having to, and with a little nice cross promotion too there. When Popeye eats his spinach, the S from his spinach can kind of goes off the can and onto his chest, because around that time in December of 41, they had just started showing the Superman shorts as well. So let's see, we saw, of course, some Terry Toon stuff as well. Quite a few interesting stuff there. Anyways, look, I'm coming up on 4 minutes now, so I guess I should talk about what's on tap for tonight. Tonight we're gonna have at least a couple articles, maybe more, because these articles do seem kind of short. They're both they're both from Bleeding Fool, and they're both from Avi Green. Looking kind of reflecting back on some these stories, or looking at least talking about some of the comics reflecting back on their character's history, as in the first article we're going to look at, it will revolve around the Silver Age Superman from the Silver Age, which is basically from the 1960s through the late 50s through the up until Crisis. And then the Bronze Age Psylocke, from the 90s. So then of course kind of do the wrestling wrap up, get caught up on last night's Monday Night Raw, look ahead to tonight's NXT, and with, of course, TNA talent should also be involved in that. And then we'll wrap things up with this day in each history. So, with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started then? Let me go grab the first article we're going to go over for the evening here. We're now coming up on 5.5 minutes here and close to 6. Anyways. All right, and a friendly reminder to my viewers, of course, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started with the first article of the evening? Unlocking the Secrets of Superman's Silver Age, Top Stories and Iconic Moments. All right, so article by Avi Green, published October 20th, which of course was yesterday. So let's take a look at this. As a cover from Superman. At the time when comics were $3.99. Of course, we go further back in time. We know they were at one time 10 cents. So, these studios here. Here's a writer at. So this is Avi, doing the intro here. Here's a writer at Comic Book who's willing, unlike some others in mainstream, take a look at some Silver Age Superman tales worth consideration. Now, this is from the article he's referencing, of course. Before I do that, let me check to see if he hasn't said anything yet. All right, not as of yet. All right. So, the Silver Age is arguably one of the best periods in comic book history, spanning from approximately 1956 to 1970. So some people might look at Bronze Age going from 1971, I guess, to 1987, I guess. The era saw the creation of new characters and concepts that would go on to be iconic and important decades later. Fantastic art and the reemergence of superheroes after a time when such stores had struggled thanks to societal controversy that blamed comics for juvenile delinquency. Basically, the thing that gave us the Comics Code Authority, right? The Silver Age was also an era of absolutely wild stories, including those that put beloved characters in strange, impressive, and often hilarious scenarios that can only be described as quote unquote quirky. I think I know where they're going with this. Some of the Jimmy Olsen, some of the stories from like Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, as well as Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I think is where they're going with this. But this is especially true for Superman's Silver Age, full of campy stories that often leaned into sci-fi territory. It's an era that was often lighthearted, but is also one that deeply expands the Superman mythos. Silver Age stories introduce major concepts about Krypton, Superman's powers, and even saw some of his classic villains start to coalesce into the threats they are today. It's a great time to be a Superman fan, and here are 7 of the greatest Superman stories from that era. So now Avi's going to respond to this here. So let's see what Avi has to say here. Just checking. Going back to the article then. So here's Avi's response to what we just read. You can read the list and judge for yourself, and they're hopefully on their way to being reprinted in the DC Finest Archive series in time. For now, interesting, they also allude to the Frederick Worthen era, because while comics may not actually be blamed for causing delinquency today, many mainstream publishers have since exploited them for far left propaganda, and simultaneously, there's been censorship occurring that Worthen would doubtless be proud of, for all the wrong reasons. Unfortunately, if such press sources were active during the 1950s, chances are they wouldn't utter Worthen led against what Worthen led to. And they certainly are complaining about wokeness today that's ruined the Superman mythos. Viewed through that perspective, it's not a great time to be a super fan. I don't know. I think there's good and bad points to Avi's argument here. I mean, in a lot of ways, you would think that Avi would be a bit more of a fan of the because a lot of the stories were more lighthearted. They were more lighter, you know. He often criticizes, it's kind of funny how Avi often criticizes a lot of the comics today for being too dark, right? But during the Silver Age, if anything, due in part, to the Comics Code Authority, right, wrong, or indifferent, you did have a lot more lighthearted stories, a lot more quote unquote kid friendly stories, as it were. Stories that could probably more easily translate to television, to shows, like the shows like the Superman Aquaman Hour, the Superman Batman Hour, the Adventures of Superman, the New Adventures of Superboy, the Aquaman show, Super Friends, the New Adventures of Batman and Robin. Yeah. All right. So, but when it comes to the older stuff from the Silver Age, yes, that's what makes it great to be a super fan. And again, I do hope more of that will eventually become available in dedicated reprint archives covering whole eras consistently. That makes it far easier to judge all the stories from an era. While obviously not all was perfect, there was still plenty that could be better, better than what's seen today. Well, yeah, because I know, obviously I've read at least a synopsis of some of the stories from that time period, and some of them are pretty fantastic. I remember one off the top of my head. I think it was from Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, where I think she had a dream or something like that, where she and Lois and Superman had gotten married and then taken Kara in as their adopted daughter. And of course, in dealing with child welfare at the time, social services at the time, one day, I remember, I guess how one of the stories ended in the dream or whatever was, the social worker was coming, Kent, Clark and Lois Lane, Kent, in this case, to check up on how Kara was doing. Now, Kara had been off on an adventure as Supergirl, so, basically, and as was per part of many stories in the Silver Age, oftentimes when Superman or Supergirl needed to, kind of almost be like two places at once or whatever, they would have, of course, their robotic duplicates, often called super robots, right? Have a robotic duplicate to kind of, and they kind of touch upon that in the, of course, in the Superman the animated series, and Justice League cartoons as well, you know. But oftentimes in the comics, if they were off on a mission elsewhere, they would use, or if they were going to be gone for a while, what would happen then? The robots would kind of take over their lives for a time, just to keep people from figuring out, the alter egos. Well, there was this one time when Lois was trying to fix one of Kara's robots, and she started kicking it. And it just so happened that the social worker was coming and saw her kicking, or what she believed was Lois kicking Kara. And, of course, led to Kara being taken out of the home of Lois and Clark. That was actually a story back in, back in the Silver Age. Of course, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, there's all kinds of crazy stories there. There's even one story where there was I think there was some kind of crossover between Superman and Congo Bill, and Congo Gorilla, and Jimmy somehow was turned into a gorilla. There have been other times when Jimmy would, for a particular issue, would develop a particular superpower, but then would lose the superpower by the end of the book. So you did have some pretty fun, entertaining stories from that era, from the Silver Age era. Let's see. That said, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. I'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So with that, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next story? And I may need to go look up another story because I think even with me kind of adding a little bit more commentary to that story, this next story is going to be just about as long. So, so here's the next story then that we're going to cover here. Let's see. Unveiling Marvel's latest flashback miniseries starring Psylocke. Article by Avi Green, published today on October 21st, 2025. All right, so there's Avi speaking here. Comic book movie announces Marvel has another Tim Seeley penned miniseries coming up following his Rogue the Savage Land story. This being a miniseries starring Psylocke in the Asian form she'd taken on around 1989, and appears to also involve a woman who'd been part of Daredevil's history, penned by Frank Miller. So now this is from the article that he's referencing here. A huge chapter of X-Men history is revealed this January in the pages of Psylocke Ninja, a 5-issue limited series written by Tim Seeley, who's famous for Rogue the Savage Land, in parentheses there, and illustrated by Nico Leon, who, in parentheses, was involved with Marvel Rivals Infinity Comics. Following recent hit series like Rogue the Savage Land and Emma Frost, the White Queen, Psylocke Ninja further explores and adds startling depth to a character's most defining era, taking place shortly after Betty Braddock's transformation by the Hand in the early 90s that turned the X-Men's posh telepath into a deadly psychic ninja. Before she rejoins the X-Men, Betsy's new body and skills are put to the ultimate test when she's targeted by Marvel's most lethal assassin, Elektra. And this is Avi's, I guess, response to what we just read there. The question here is whether Elektra Natchios is portrayed as reformed, because that's what first took place the year after she died from Bullseye's assault, and was later resurrected by the Hand by 1994 when she turned up again in Daredevil series. She continued her reformation. That having been said, it's admittedly interesting how Marvel wants to revisit some of these eras, what some might interpret as an attempt to show their respect. They respect continuity as it was up to the early 2000s, but it's still not enough to convince Marvel's worth reading again. Even DC could be doing similar, harkening back to storylines. Well, we just did kind of talk about one, right, in the previous article there, written up into the early 2000s. It still wouldn't make it okay to just buy their stuff after how bad they've become with their wokeness. Yeah, that one was pretty quick too. So again, these are more announcement type stuff. So, anyways, as I said, those are some pretty quick. So I'm gonna see if maybe we can find maybe one more article to look up. Is just give me a sec here. Let's see. Oh wow, that Park Place didn't do anything today. Apparently. My one actually. All right, I think I did find another article to go over here from Bounding into Comics. This one might take us a little bit longer here, so I'll go ahead and bring that one up. And for those who are My Hero Academia fans, this is an article you might want to pay attention to. All right, so My Hero Academia mangaka Kohei Horikoshi, heavily involved with live-action Netflix film. Quote, there's nothing that he doesn't give notes on, unquote. Now, this potentially a pretty good, pretty good start, because we've heard what happens when the original creators are involved versus when they're not. When they bring in the original creators to really be a part of the process, it does help. It does help to make the live action product better. We saw that with One Piece, right? As opposed to what they did with Cowboy Bebop. Article by Spencer Bacouli, published yesterday. All right, so let's get down to this then. After extensively learning from both Cowboy Bebop and One Piece that collaborating with a given works original creator is far more conducive to an adaptation success than letting random studio writers and execs, quote unquote, do their own thing. In other words, how they learned from the experiences is that contrasting experience, because Cowboy Bebop, the original creator had very little say in how the show was run, whereas One Piece, his creator was pretty much full on in. So Cowboy Bebop bombed while One Piece, shot to the stars. Netflix has made it a point to actively run just about every production decision related to the live-action My Hero Academia film past the original mangaka Kohei Horikoshi. This insight into Deku's upcoming silver screen adventure was provided by the film's writer Jason Fuchs. I'm saying it Fuchs. I don't know. I'm hoping that that's the right pronunciation, because there is one other pronunciation could be, but I don't think that is probably the one we want to focus on. So, anyways. During a recent interview given to Entertainment Weekly's Nick Romano in promotion of HBO's soon-to-premiere It, Welcome to Derry, for which he serves as its co-creator and co-showrunner, met with the observation from Romano that Netflix's track record of live-action adaptations has been shaky has been, in smaller quotes, shaky at best, with rare gems like One Piece, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Alice in Borderlands, outnumbered by disasters like Cowboy Bebop, Death Note 2017, Bet, in parentheses, itself an adaptation of Kakegurui, in parentheses, and the Full Metal Alchemist trilogy. Fuchs admitted that he was rather confident that My Hero Academia would fall into the former category rather than the latter, particularly as, quote, we have creators who are present, in brackets, Horikoshi is very involved, unquote. Oh, they know that they don't want to turn fans away, so they're going to make sure that it's done right. Let's see if you guys are saying anything as of yet. All right. Nope, it's not. All right. So, quote, there's no treatment, there's no outline, there's no scenes, there's no nothing that Kohei doesn't give notes on. React to, in brackets, with thumbs up, thumbs down, unquote, he asserted. Quote, that makes me feel really confident that we're going to deliver something that fans like myself feel great about, unquote. Well, that's for those shows that they talked about that failed. That's what they should have been doing in the first place, and many fans had called them out for it, right? I remember the whole controversy that was talked about when they did the live action Cowboy Bebop, and like Danielle Pineda was like just kind of denouncing people for feeling they wanted, a Faye Valentine who was more true to form, the femme fatale she was known for, noting that the film was still, in quotes here, very early in its development process, Fuchs then explained that when translating the manga to the silver screen, he was most concerned with capturing the, so I'll quote, spirit and character of the series. Small quote, various heroes and villains. Quote, you want to do something that feels authentic to the material. You want to do something that fans feel respects the canon and the original, and also find an access point for the people who've never read, in brackets, the manga, who's never seen the first films. Quote, in brackets, Deku, unbracketed, is a young man who is in the 20% of quirkless people in a world where everyone has something special. You connect with him so quickly. You connect with all these characters being faithful to those characters and forms all of it. Unquote. Originally beginning life in 2018 under Legendary Entertainment, the rights to produce a live-action My Hero Academia film were eventually sold to Netflix in December 2022, who initially tapped Obi-Wan Kenobi in Transformers Rise of the Beast writer Joby Harold to pen its script. Before hiring Fuchs rewrite the entire thing this past November. All right, a little grammatical issue there, but anyways, ultimately, whether or not the film actually gives Horikoshi's work the respect it deserves, or ever actually comes out, remains to be seen. And while One Piece has proven Netflix is full of surprises when it comes to adapting Japanese material, fans would do best to keep their hopes tempered until they actually see the final product, and they can confirm its quality for themselves. Alrighty then, so that's all we got for that one. So let me see here. Let's see now where we're at on time. All right, so yeah, so I think it would be a good time to kind of move on to the wrestling wrap up. Then we're just past the half-hour mark here, 33 minutes here, so I probably will go ahead and start moving on to the wrestling wrap up. Of course, when I look back to last night's Raw, some major events happening there. Look ahead to tonight's NXT. Then we'll probably get ready to close things out with This Day in Each History. So, anyways, let me just go look up the wrestling stuff here. Of course, one piece of news I can give about last night's Monday Night Raw, of course, it was official that Seth Rollins did relinquish the WWE World Heavyweight title, as his injury has been talked about, and of course, even Becky Lynch had some things to say to Paul Heyman about how he and the Bronze turned on Seth. So last night's Monday Night Raw came from the Golden One Center in Sacramento, California, with of course Joe Tessitore, Wade Barrett on commentary. I think CM Punk did some guest commentary at one point. So the show opened up with a WWE World Tag Team title match as AJ Styles and Dragon Lee. I guess some fans calling their team the team of Team AJ Lee, not to be confused with the female wrestler and CM Punk's wife, of course. They saw them defeat the Judgment Day's Finn Balor and JD McDonough to become the new WWE World Tag Team title. Some people were looking at this as a good thing, as they weren't really doing much with Balor and McDonough as tag team champions. So they're hoping now with Styles and Lee here that they'll start to do something with those tag belts. And what many believe to be a continuing slow face turn for Dominic Mysterio, he retained the Intercontinental title over Rusev as he's getting over, basically doing the Eddie Guerrero gimmick from back in the 90s, kind of the lie, cheat, steal gimmick, using some tomfoolery and trickery and chicanery to get by, and fans are just loving it. In a match for the WWE Women's Intercontinental title, Becky Lynch retained on a DQ loss. She got herself DQ'd in a match over Maxine Dupree. Dupree won the match, but not the title, as Lynch got herself disqualified, apparently. In a non-title match, WWE Women's World Champion Stephanie Vaquer defeated Roxanne Perez. And after the match, of course, Roxanne Perez and Raquel Rodriguez of Judgment Day decided to try to double team her, only for Nikki Bella to come out and make the save. Now, earlier in the night, of course, as I mentioned, Seth Rollins was stripped of the WWE World title. But what happened was that Braun Breaker was the one who had possession of the belt after Breaker and Reed, the Bronze, beat him down last week and basically stole the belt from him. Adam Pearce forced him to come out and basically give him the belt. It was then announced that the WWE would be holding a number one contendership battle royal, as the winner of that battle royal would be facing CM Punk at the next Saturday night's main event coming up here. I believe it might be in August or December, but and the participants of course in the match included AJ Styles, Kira Tozawa, Dominic Mysterio, Dragon Lee, El Grande Americano, Finn Balor, Grayson Waller, Ivar, JD McDonough, Jimmy Uso, Kofi Kingston, LA Knight, Otis, Penta, Rusev, and Sheamus, and Jey Uso, and with Jey Uso being the one to get the win, which many fans were not. Apparently, there were a number of fans who were not happy with this. But what people because there are a lot of people who wanted to see LA Knight win the match, but there's some talk that they may be planning to put the title eventually on LA Knight at some point, but it won't be in 2025. It might be in 2026. There's some talk they want to continue building him up a bit more, so they don't want to give him like a clean loss. And if he won the Battle Royal, he'd probably have to take, because I think for now they want to put the title with Rollins out for a while, to have shoulder surgery. As we talked the other day, he might, considered he might be out, till after WrestleMania 42. So I think they're wanting to at least put the title in the short term on CM Punk. There's also some talk too that Braun Breaker might also get involved in that match at the main event show. In other injury news, it would appear that Jacob Fatu's status may not be as bad as initially reported. As initially reported, they're saying he might be out until after the beginning of the year here with taking care of some medical issues. Apparently, he does need to take some time off, apparently, to take care of some dental work. But now it seems that they believe he'll be ready to come back by Survivor Series, and he will be possibly hey Metal, thanks for popping in. He'll be looking to be back, and they're looking, once he comes back, he might be continuing his feud with Drew McIntyre. Let me see here. So awesome. So that's all that happened on last night's Monday Night Raw. I'm sorry. I actually need to step away from the computer for a moment here. I'll be right back. I'm going to put some music on. Right back. Sorry about that. Anyways, I'm back now. So let's start to finish this up a bit. Me now, of course, move along to looking ahead to tonight's NXT show, which will also entail, which will likely, of course, have some talents from NXT on it as well, or not. I'm sorry, not TNA. All right, not. Sorry about that. Anyways, so tonight's NXT coming from the Performance Center in Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. Already signed for tonight's in a tag team match. Former NXT tag team champions Hank and Tank, Tank Ledger and Hank Walker. They'll be taking on the team of OTM of Bronco Nima and Lucian Price. The first time we've seen these guys in quite some time. And a match for the TNA X Division, as we said, some TNA crossover here. TNA X as the TNA NXT rivalry seems to continue to be going here. In so Leon Slater, TNA X Division champion Leon Slater will be defending the X Division title against NXT's Heritage Cup champion Channing Lorenzo, who will have, of course, Adriana Grace in his corner. In a number one contendership, and then you'll have two number one contender tournament semifinal matches for the WWE Speed title, as in one match, Axiom of the tag team for Axiom, current SmackDown wrestler, taking on Sean Legacy of the Evolve program. And then in the other semifinal match, you have Zachary Wentz of TNA taking on Jasper Troy. So that's all slated for tonight's NXT. Of course, we'll have results of all that tomorrow, along with looking ahead to tomorrow night's Dynamite. So with that now, I'm going to start to wrap things up, as we will now, of course, with today being Tuesday. Again, let me go off camera here one more time here. This will be a little better. Right back. So today is, as I said, Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. So let's go ahead and take a look back at this date in Nietzsche history. 65. 55. 2005 and 1985. All right. All right, so first off, I'm going to head back 70 years ago today, as on this date, 70 years ago today, back in 1955, as soon, of course, as I bring that up here. So on this date, 70 years ago, back in 1955, the National Wrestling Alliance's Upstate promotion, based in upstate New York, from the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium, held an event back on the state. The main event saw a battle of two former NWA world champions as Whipper Billy Watson, the man credited with innovating, creating whatever you want to call the Irish whip, which is where you take a person by the arm, whip them off the ropes, or whip them into the corner. Defeating Bronco Nagurski in a battle of two former NWA world champions. Of course, their reigns were during the time of the National Wrestling Association. That was the main event. You also saw in British star Lord Athol Leighton defeat Lionel Baljan. The Mighty Atlas and Sally Samara went to a 30-minute time limit draw, and opening up the event with a 20-minute time limit draw. Saw Gypsy Joe and Pat Fraley go to a time limit draw as well. So back when pro wrestling was considered more sport than sports entertainment. So that happened 70 years ago today. An event at the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium in upstate New York, in New York upstate. So now, getting ready to move on to the next piece of niche history. Move ahead to the year 1965, 60 years ago today. On this date in 1965, the 100th issue of Doom Patrol went on sale on this date back in 1965. It sold for 12 cents with 32 pages. Of course, the two featured stories that were in this book included the fantastic origin of Beast Boy. So Beast Boy's first appearance, I would gather, and Robot Man, Wanted Dead or Alive, were featured in this particular story. Let's see. The fantastic origin of Beast Boy, written by Arnold Drake and with art by Bruno Primari, was in Doom Patrol number 100 on this date 60 years ago. All right, so now moving on to the next piece of niche history. We move on to the year 1985, 40 years ago today. On this date, 40 years ago today, Suchida Productions and Wonder Kids OVA, Chuhei Lemon Love 30s was released on this date 40 years ago today. So 40 years ago today, Suchida Productions and Wonder Kids OVA, Chuhei Lemon Love 30s was released on this day 40 years ago. Anyways. And finally, the one last piece of niche history that we'll get to in a moment here. All right, so on this date, 20 years ago today, in 2005, The fourth season of The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy concluded on this date on Cartoon Network, on this date back in 2005, with a half-hour special prank call of Cthulhu. So, on this date 20 years ago today, the fourth season of The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy concluded on Cartoon Network with the half-hour special prank call of Cthulhu. All right, then. So, with that being said, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Of course, we'll be back here with more Niche News tomorrow, and I'll be joined, of course, by Apex. Apex Comics on Sunday, as we'll be starting our July of 1940 coverage. The books that went on comics went on sale July of 1940. So with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.